world goes wrong, then we'll suffer. Ajahn Chah's message through his life and through his presence to me was no thing, no person, no event, no situation has the power to make you suffer, or even should be seen as negative, should be judged in any way. We're actually free to make our own decision. So this is how, say, towards the end of his life, for 10 years, I believe, from the early 80s to the early 90s, he didn't say a word. He simply lay in Wat Nong Pa Pong, and people were able to go and pay respects and take away whatever they were able to from the situation. And in time, Dharma was translated into English, tapes, and later CDs. And so these teachings lived on. Now, Ajahn Chah's strength, as I understand it and really experienced it, and his real wisdom was emphasizing Sangha. Sangha means the monastic Sangha, but it means community, and community harmony. But of course, as a monk, particularly his close focus of teaching, especially in the early years, had been on the monks who came to stay with him, because he was very unknown for many years. And there were key teachings that he brought into his monastic training. Some of the things we'll hear about later on, his Vinaya instructions. But essentially there were some key themes to Ajahn Chah's life, which the monastic Sangha inherited, tried their best to integrate into their own lives. And I feel it's very valuable to share to this day, because they're valid as timeless teachings. That his teachings come all the way from the Buddha's time, yet he was able to make them, bring them to life in the present moment, and then transmit them. So as I said at the beginning, it was tough in his monasteries. Khanti means patient endurance. It's a barami, it's spiritual quality. And partly, in those days, northeast Thailand was much poorer. There's been huge material development in the last 20 years. But it was also tough because Luang Por Chah made it tough. The tradition is what we call the Dutonga tradition. So all the things like eating in one's alms bowl, going on alms round, and being frugal, and getting up early together as a Sangha, coming together and chanting these words together, supporting each other in our practice, and reflecting on Dhamma and meditating together through the wee hours of the dawn, and in the evening as well, sometimes late into the night. So this tough foundation, Khanti, patient endurance, was what gave the men and women living there the strength to put up with the difficulties. Now, the obstacles in life begin with the physical ones, difficulties from heat, cold, hunger, etc., and perhaps sharp words. But then also, as Luang Por Chah taught, the real patient endurance, the real need to bear with our own moods, our mental states, not to react and respond to the swings of delight and aversion, wanting and not wanting, liking, disliking, judging as good and bad, having a mind which is able to stay even and balanced, using a certain amount of patient endurance. And Ajahn Chah said himself, this takes a certain daring. I heard he was asked, well, what makes you special, Luang Por? What do you have that other monks don't have? He said, nothing really, but I dared. And this comes out when you listen to the monks who lived with him. He would say, patiently endure with patience. Dare to be patient, dare to endure. Because it takes a kind of courage. And so he managed to weave that into his monastic framework, with activities right throughout the day which were challenging, often physically difficult conditions, training you to go against the stream. You heard this morning Ajahn Sumedho saying he came back to Wat Pa Pong to offer his life to Ajahn Chah, and Ajahn Chah sent him off to establish Wat Panana Chah, which was the last thing he wanted to do, but to challenge us. And that's what we need in order to to stand up to, or to, in order to really investigate and understand on a deeper level what was also at the heart of Ajahn Chah's teaching. Most of you don't speak Thai, but if you do learn any words of Thai, I would suggest the 2 words you should learn are mai ne. These 2 words mean not sure. And this was his own slightly loose and liberal translation of the common Buddhist teaching, sanya anicca. Perception is impermanent, or just anicca in general. Sabbe sankhara anicca, all conditions are impermanent, all conditioned phenomena are impermanent. That's a very formal and lofty way of putting it. He would say, nothing is certain. Nothing is stable. And this is a very direct teaching, one which we don't really have to have much experience with scriptures or much of a deep spiritual foundation to be able to take on and apply to our lives. We ask ourselves, yeah, actually, what is certain? And this response of the monk, when I asked him, if this is Ajahn Chah, if this is what happens to him, what hope is there for us? And he said, well, why do you assume he's suffering? And the answer is, yeah, it's true. It's not certain, is it? And straight away we're able to let go. So this idea of uncertainty was something which, for someone like myself, coming in cold, with no background in meditation, even with no interest, this wasn't something I planned on doing for the rest of my life, just like Ajahn Sumedho. He was thinking of 2 years, I was thinking of 2 weeks. But it's like something reels you in, something inside you is saying, there's much more here than meets the eye. There's much more investigation to do. And if this is truth, you can't turn your back on it. If that's really what you feel, that life, as you understand it, really is uncertain, that where you're putting your certainty may well one day let you down, then it's almost like an obligation or a responsibility to seek something more solid, just as if we were building a house. We would need solid foundations. And Rinpoche himself would say again and again, we have to start with the foundation work. He would often talk about this when talking about sila, this being the foundations for our lives. So the ability to begin to see that all things were not sure. And this was something which would be a common theme in the Dhamma talks I began to read and began to listen to. So we start with seeing, yes, the body is uncertain, it's not sure. We see that people get old and sick, and although we know it's going to happen to all of us, we don't know when. In the sala, the hall, the meditation hall, the Wat Bananacha, and many monasteries, there was a skeleton hanging up in a glass cabinet, which again, the first day I arrived, I looked at this skeleton and I really wondered what kind of a place I'd somehow landed in. But the van that dropped me off had already gone, and I didn't have any money, so I was stuck, at least for the moment, and that was before the mobile phones. I couldn't call home and say, get me out of here. So I was looking at this skeleton, and then at the bottom of the glass cabinet, in another smaller jar, was a very, very young baby which had died in infancy in a preserved jar, and that looked so horrible. But the teaching of that was more powerful than just that we're all going to get old and sick and die. It's really that actually it can happen any time, even right at the beginning of life, when we would all say that shouldn't happen. It can. So we're beginning to contemplate and seeing how impermanence is much more a part of life than we would ever imagine. And so not only on the material realm, the physical realm, our own bodies, but then of course our thoughts. And more interestingly, this was what really intrigued me. And I think with a Western upbringing and education, many of you share kind of rigorous education. We hold very much to our perceptions and our views. We're actually trained to cultivate views and then hold on to them like mad. And it's very challenging to let go of them, and something that's very destabling. So one night I was listening to a talk in the hall to the senior monk, an English monk, many of you know, Ajahn Jayasara, was giving a talk. And he began to talk about how our perceptions are impermanent, and began to talk about our views and opinions. And he just mentioned things like political views, views around the environment, or views around social issues. And he just simply asked the question again, can you really be sure about any of your views? That are any of them really absolutely sure? I mean, can you actually say that? It's not saying they're all wrong. You don't have to suddenly go into a sense that you don't know anything. But asking the question, can we really be sure that we're right? And again, simply that gives a little opening where we're able to see the truth. Simply that we might be right, but we might be wrong. And just that opening to know that there was something to consider, I actually found almost like a huge burden was lifted off my heart. Because aged 18, as you know, there's so much pressure to know, what are you going to do? What would you like to be? What are your social attitudes and values? Are you politically correct? What kind of orientations do you have in all kinds of areas? You have to know. And there's this kind of constant challenge in group situations. Will you say the right thing and be accepted, or be convincing, or be successful, or just be right? And to be able to say, actually it's okay not to know, to hear the teacher encouraging that was not refreshing. It was, like I said, like a huge weight lifted. And again, another sense that this is truth. In the same way that we're going to get old and sick and die, it's truth. I realize, nothing is sure. Nothing is permanent, and nothing is stable. Even if things are permanent for a little, we can have a sense of a short-term permanency, but it's very unstable. And so, what a sort of a very different way to investigate things. And so, this is the kind of the gradual teaching, you could say, of Ajahn Chah, the particular dhammas that he picked up from. Not his own Dhamma, this is the timeless teachings that the Buddha himself had taught. And those weren't his either, as he said again and again. This is akaliko. But Ajahn Chah's skill was to find a few current themes and weave them together. So from mai ne, not sure, or unstable, we come to, well then, what are we holding on to? So first we see that the holding on to our thoughts, our views, opinions, that's actually very difficult. It's like again, one of Luang Por Chah's similes was like carrying bags. You carry these bags around, and it's so heavy, and you just feel so heavy. And somebody says, "Well, put down the bags," and you say, "Well, then I won't have my bags." And in a minute, you can still have them. Just put them down. You don't have to carry them all the time, and use them skillfully. And so, just to be able to put down that knowing was so uplifting and enlightening for the heart. In a sense, it made the heart feel light and less burdened rather than more burdened. So that this theme, this is a theme which I'm sure you'll hear more of today, of letting go. Luang Por Chah taught us just to let go through seeing just how unsure all of these things were. So in a sense, this is a few very, very kind of snippets of his teachings, but just to share with you how somebody who's now long passed away, but even at that time wasn't teaching, how he was able to inspire people, not just myself, but many, many others, simply to dedicate their whole lives to the path. There's certainly a leap of faith, because even then and now, no one can prove Ajahn Chah's enlightenment or any of the enlightened ones. We don't have this direct knowledge. But we look and we see, how does somebody live their life? And what are the constant words they use? And then, particularly in times of adversity, when things become difficult, when the body is breaking down, when everything's going wrong? How do they react? And when somebody reacts with a smile, or with the equanimity, or with the metta, or with the sense of never mind, just let go, then we get a sense, it's a little inkling that this person has something, some kind of wisdom that we'd like to have as well. And so that was the experience. And as I said at the beginning, his sense of creating Sangha was so beautiful. And what struck me most was the true reverence, not just reverence, but deep love. The only word really is love, that his direct disciples and the lay people of Ubon had for him. In Thai we have the expression, "Paw me Kruba Ajan." Paw me means mother, father. And Kruba Ajan means monk, teacher, like our Ajan, Acharya or Sayadaw. So he was referred to as Paw me Kruba Ajan, mother, father, teacher, mother, father, Ajan. Not just Ajahn Chah. To people who lived with him and studied under him, he was mother, father, Ajahn Chah. So sometimes his name is translated as Luang Po, which means venerable father. But in Thai they acknowledge that side of him which was the mother too. He seemed to have cared for the Sangha, nurtured them through their early monastic years, not only giving birth to them as monks by ordaining them, but then nurturing them through their early years, leading by example, being there himself. 3 a.m, they used to say that sometimes you couldn't ring the bell because he would ring it first. And then when you got to the sala one day thinking you were going to get there first, you were second because he was there already. So leading by example, leading with metta, leading with love, but also, from what I've heard, being very fierce when it was time to be fierce. Because sometimes we do need a shock, like children, you have to scold them. I don't know, I'm not a parent. But from what I'm told, you do have to scold your children. They need their boundaries, they need their strict, clear guidelines, whether it's vinaya, whether it's admonishment. And he was there to do that, but in a way where everybody trusted that his intentions were entirely pure, that he had nothing but good wishes for people at all times. It wasn't that there were times when he wished everybody well, but then there were also times when he got angry with you and actually somehow experienced negativity. The outward expression of fierceness was simply knowing what we needed to learn. His disciples sometimes needed a sharp rebuke, and actually in Thai culture that was quite acceptable. With the Westerners, with their different conditioning and sense of fear and a deep, often inability to take strong words, he was very, very gentle. He was the warm and loving grandfather, and that was also the later years of his life. So he was this very skilled master in learning how to pass over the Dhamma that he had experienced. That sense of being a parent to the Sangha, and not just the Sangha. His kuti was like an open house. Ajahn Sumedho was telling me recently, even after evening chanting, 9 p.m, 10 p.m, sometimes villagers would come, they have a problem, and they would go and see him. He would receive them under his kuti with warmth, and they would tell them about his problem. And often it wasn't so much what he would give them, but simply the fact that he was there to listen to them and had time for them. So this sense of growing the Sangha. So every year now in Thailand there's an annual week-long meditation Dhamma practice festival and Dhamma talks. It's a bit like today's event, but it lasts 1 week, and there's 5,000 lay people and 2,000 monks camping in mosquito nets and tents and sleeping on mats in the forest of his monastery around his jedi, and waking up early, listening to Dhamma all day, practicing meditation, and recollecting and reflecting on the teacher. And what comes up again and again and again is that when we do this, when we come to practice in this way, it doesn't matter whether Ajahn Chah is long gone or the Buddha himself is 2,500 years ago gone before us. It doesn't really matter. We can all be disciples of the Buddha. We can all be disciples of Ajahn Chah. or any enlightened teacher, if we take those teachings and put them into practice. So in the same way, the Buddha had his very famous teaching to a monk when he told him, "One who sees the Dhamma sees me. Yo dhammang passati, so mang passati." One who sees the Dhamma sees me. One who sees me sees the Dhamma. And in Thailand, this is what's the constant refrain during this Ajahn Chah practice week is if we practice the Dhamma in the way our teachers did, then it's as if we see them. It wasn't that those disciples who were lucky enough to be there 30, 40 years ago and to be sitting in the same meditation hall with the master somehow got some magical some magical inspiration or transmission from him. It's up to us right now to take these teachings. Now there's so much books and Dhamma talks and information available, but do we dare to put it into practice in our daily life? Do we dare to challenge ourselves and say, actually, that perception I have is not sure? Can we stop ourselves when we're getting into an argument and say, hang on, I won't let my mind move towards negativity. I'll stay with metta, tolerance, understanding. You know, this is how to be a Ajahn Chah disciple in this modern life. And so for myself and many of the monks here, and all the monks ordaining in his tradition today, we can't say we had Ajahn Chah as our teacher, but we can say those teachings are with us today, and we dedicate our life to the teacher in the same way that all of us here, I'm sure, are dedicating our lives at least to Buddha Dhamma Sangha. It's not really about an individual person, and today isn't about some kind of guru devotion to a particular individual, but about discussing, listening to, sharing, and celebrating timeless truths, and hopefully taking away some of it, part of it, reflecting on it, and then bringing it into our lives for our own well-being, for the benefit, for the happiness of us all. So on this occasion, it's a very great privilege to be invited to come and share these few short words. I sincerely wish that everybody here can take some inspiration from this whole event and is further encouraged and moved to share the spirit of Sangha, harmony, community life, practicing Dhamma Vinaya in line with the teachings of the Buddha, dedicating our lives to the Triple Gem. It seems to be a very worthy thing to devote ourselves to. So I'd like to end my talk there.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.